what I realized is that if I want to be a certain version of myself in the future, that picture of the perfect life in the future wasn't going to happen for me if I continued on behaving or thinking the same way I did prior.
So if you're in your life right now and you're finding that you're bumping your head against a wall constantly, the most powerful question you can ask yourself is, how am I impacting this? Welcome back to the Thoughtonomy podcast. I'm Grant Gavin, and we're here at the Tim Studios in Hillcrest. And the Thoughtonomy podcast, we're here to help you to think for yourself in a world that wants to do it for you. And I'm joined today by a very special friend of mine. It actually features in the first chapter of the book. So I thought it'd be great to get him in and chat to him a little bit about his life and his story. And it's Joshua Friedman. Welcome, Joshy.
Thank you, Granty.
Lovely to have you here.
Good to be here.
I think for everyone who's listening out there, let's just take a minute or so and just tell everybody what you're about.
Jeez, what am I about? I'm a new dad, fairly new, 2-year-old, 6-month-old. And I guess that's a big part of my current season is fatherhood. Hey, I've been a person who's been very career-driven over the years. And yeah, I guess I'm adjusting to fatherhood and family life, and even thinking about some of the things we might chat about today, just realizing how that's completely changed the way I view the world and the way I see things and what's important to me. Outside of being a dad and a husband, I am also the regional manager for Betterbond in KZN. And I suppose that takes up all my other time outside of family life.
Yeah. And what a difference. I mean, when I first met you, probably 6 years ago, kids weren't on the agenda. Marriage probably wasn't on the agenda either. And your transformation and growth over those last 6 years has been phenomenal. And we're going to get to that today. But I think where we start is chapter 1 in the book. You've read the book, right?
Yes, I've read it.
Okay, awesome. How many times have you read it?
Only once. It took me a year, but we'll blame a newborn for that.
So chapter 1 starts off with a lot about my journey and my growth in terms of conditioning. And I think conditioning is a big thing that I want to speak to everybody about today and how it impacts you on your behaviors. But there's a little feature between you and I in that opening chapter with regards to this powerful goal that we set and how we both didn't believe in it. And it kind of documents my growth through that. And I kind of get the feeling that there's a little Thoughtonomy book on Josh Friedman that could possibly quite shadow the backstory to the brief mention that we made of you in that story. And I guess let's go back to probably the first time you and I really interacted, where I was looking for a manager in the business. My old man had gone overseas, and I was stressing out as to how I was going to do it on my own. And Josh Friedman was a name that came up quite a bit. And in those days, you were doing super, super well in real estate. Right? Take me back to that time and the decision process in terms of how do I go from being an agent to a leader or a manager? Because it's something you really were looking for, right? What was the shift there?
So going back then, I think I identified that in the real estate industry specifically, there was a lack of what I would call leadership, especially young leadership. Even from a training, mentorship, having started off in real estate when I was 20, it took me quite a while to get going. It took me at least 3-4 years to get to a point where I'd say, as Jared mentioned a few weeks ago on his career, he put it very well, where I made a career of it. But looking back, I could see that it didn't have to take other people 3 to 4 years. There was a way to do it quicker. It had taken me a while to figure out what the blueprint was, but I couldn't see anyone else in my space taking that information and passing it on to the next generation of agents. So I identified there was a gap, but what I also knew is that I didn't know how to bridge that gap. So it sort of put me on the search to figure out, well, how do I become a lead? I didn't want to become a manager as such. Leadership was what stood out to me there. It was really just about making decisions, I guess leaving the first place where I created my real estate career in search of something, but not knowing exactly what that something was, but knowing that there was something more that I wanted to get towards and learn more of.
And you're right, there was a gap. Even I noticed that gap because in looking for people at that time, outside of you, there was nobody else that I'd seen out there in the marketplace who was young, dynamic, good real estate agent, but who wanted to make the step. Because quite often when you get into a career of sales, the opportunity to make money is immense. You take a bit of a step back there. So what was it that kind of led you to that drive to go, okay, I can carry on doing this myself and I can make good income, or I can go and share the knowledge that I've built and develop other people?
So and you're going to laugh, but it actually came from a place where no matter how good I was at what I did in real estate, no matter how much my clients referred me, no matter how much, everyone I worked with, we had the desired outcomes and I had good referrals from it and good feedback. Every time I met someone new, I started again as just that estate agent. And I had to sort of break a mold or prove myself because, to be fair, people don't have a high view of estate agents, if you look at the public. So it became a passion of mine to improve that. How do I change the perception of the average person out there of the real estate industry? And I felt I had to look inwards. I had to look back into the industry and go, well, how do we improve the average agent? And that really is what drove me.
And you mentioned there, I had to look inwards. In terms of self-reflection, where did you have to go inwards on your side to make the shift?
So I guess I didn't quite know. I knew something was missing. I didn't know what exactly, but I also knew that I wasn't getting it from my current environment. I think I had to make a change to be able to focus. And I guess therein lies the answer, where when I came to you, a big appeal for joining your team was that I wasn't going to sell and manage at the same time, because at that stage I was getting some management experience, but as much as I wanted to grow myself in this avenue, when you're waking up every day as an agent, having to start from scratch and generating an income, I found it quite challenging to put 100% focus on myself to grow as a leader while still worrying about generating an income. So yes, I had to take a pay knock or an income decrease to do so, but it just felt like what I needed to do needed 100% of my focus.
And it's commendable. And why I say it's commendable, because at the age that you were at the time, which was probably early 30s, right?
27 when I joined
27 when you, okay, awesome. Yeah. In fact, that was the age I was when I took over the business as well. So at age 27, it's not common to have a young person go, I'm prepared to take a knock in income to get to where I want to be with my career, my life, whatever it is. What was the biggest shift that you had to make from going from an agent who inherently, well, let's not use agent, let's use salesperson, right? Who inherently is there for their own benefit, and I say that respectfully. We're there to make money, right? And if I'm competing in a sales environment, I'm either going to close a deal or my competitor is. He's going to put food on the table while I'm. There's definitely a fight for closing the deal. So the focus is inherently on oneself, as opposed to now shifting into a leadership position where the focus shifts to on others. I'm here to grow others. What did you find most difficult coming into that new environment?
So, well, you'll remember me coming into the team for the first time, but I think at that point it was about making everyone around me be like me, or be the top, be the best agent, and holding everyone around me to a certain standard, which I don't think is realistic when you're leading or managing people. I think what it took me about a year under your guidance to understand is if I can help each person improve by 10%, that's a lot better than just culling or ensuring that you've got a high performance team of certain individuals. I think it's just about trying to help everyone get the best out of themselves, and everyone has their own set of ambitions. Everyone has their own targets. It's not for me to dictate what those should be. It's understanding from them what it is they want, and can I help them get closer to the objective.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the journey in leadership is also empathy, is understanding that person who you're trying to lead, and you really want the best for them and you want them to grow. And as you say, it's very frustrating because you know they can do so much more than what they're doing now. And that's the frustration, because you can't force somebody to change. But the empathy is understanding the life journey and the set of circumstances that have led that person to that point. And we speak a lot about conditioning in the book. And before we go into the topic of conditioning, because it's quite a big topic to cover, there was a journey that you and I took, which is documented in that first chapter, where I think both of us, and I always say I learned as much from you as you learned from me in our time together, and that's power, right? That really is power. But the goal setting that we did, which is documented in the book, I think we both had to overcome certain conditioning and the ways that we were thinking about ourselves, in terms of if we were going to achieve it, we had to go to work internally first. What strikes, if you look back at that time now, and for those of you who haven't read the book, just very simply and very quickly, just to catch people up on that, Josh and I set a goal for the business where either I would win a Owner of the Year award or a Franchisee of the Year award, or Josh would win the Manager of the Year. And I actually said to Josh, we're not going to do it together. There's no ways they're going to award both of us the same award from the same franchise. So if you win your award, I'll take it that I've done my job as your leader. And if I win the award, then you take it that you've done your job as supporting the company in those goals. But we didn't believe that we would win both of them. And nobody around us actually believed that we would win both of it. Until I went and sat with a coach who pretty frankly and quite abruptly said to me, why do you believe that you can't win both awards? And I didn't know what to say to her. But when I look back now, what I learned from that process is I fundamentally didn't believe that we could because I didn't believe in myself. I didn't believe in the value that I could provide. And inherently, there was a limiting belief from my conditioning of my past as to why I wasn't worthy of this. What was the biggest lesson that you learned from that process? Because fast track, we go to convention and we both end up winning this award, but it came through quite a long process of growth for both of us. What was the biggest lesson that you took from that experience?
Sure, I must be honest. That was, firstly, you didn't share with me your limits. You never had the discussion with me that we potentially could both win, right? It was a clear cut, we're not both going to win.
It was one or the other.
It was one or the other. Yeah. Right up until the night of the awards, not for 1 second did you mention to me, look, and there's the opportunity that both of us might win here. So I was so bought into the idea that, well, whether you win or I win, we've both won. So I think...
And remember, limiting beliefs are unconscious. So I probably didn't realize my limiting belief either. And when we were setting the goal, that was, my reality was, it's either going to be you or I. We're going to win one of the two. We cannot win both. Unknown that there's this limiting belief that's playing out that I need to go to work on. Anyway, sorry, back to what you were saying.
Yeah, so... It was one or the other, but working both towards the same goal was ultimately what it was about. And I just remember that year was, I think I'd been with you 2 years already. So I spent my first year, I think that first year at your office was quite unnerving. It was a place where I felt quite lost. And it was only when I got to work on myself towards the end of that first year that I started to become more confident in my ability as a leader. That second year really helped me understand where the gaps were in the business. So in that third year, which is I think the year where we really pumped it was just plugging those gaps. It was going, right, if I take a 12-month calendar, what did we do last year? What did we do in the first year? And what can we do more of? And we just got to work every month, just focusing on the team, focusing on the business, focusing on just pushing, trying everything to do a little bit better.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to see
So for anybody who's listening going, can you break that down? So I always say, if you want to achieve anything, you got to know what you want. And then you got to break it down into the activity steps that you need to do to get that goal. So in the case of an award, I'd worked at the head office. I understood the things that they were going to look for. You got to grow your sales. You got to grow your commission. You got to grow the number of agents in your office. You got to do community events. You've got to give back. You've got to be seen to be giving back to the community. So we literally took that and we felt if we just ticked every single one of those boxes, we were in for a shot at getting the award. Awards can also sometimes be subjective, and you don't know who's doing what in other parts of the country, but we put ourselves into a position where we just made sure we did whatever it takes to tick every single one of those boxes to give ourselves the opportunity to win.
100%. And just like the team trying to grow each person by 10%, it's good we grow each of those areas as much as possible.
Interestingly, for Betterbond now, how do you structure goal setting with your consultants and limiting beliefs?
So first thing I need to understand from each of them, and it's probably what I did with the entire team when I first joined, was understanding where they're currently at and where they want to be. Couldn't get to work with helping them if both they and I didn't know what is it they want. And for everyone, that's different. So I think that was difference coming into you versus now is that I knew, it's not my job to set the goals or to set the targets. Yes, as the coach, I'm there to help guide. And if I feel someone's leaving a little bit on the table, can I push them a little bit past? Or if someone's setting something that's a bit unrealistic, can I try and bring them to a place where we've got achievable goals? But ultimately, it's about what do they want for their business? What are the steps that need to be taken? What are they prepared to do? What are they not prepared to do? And what can I hold them accountable to through that?
And if you're sitting with someone and their goal's not good enough for you as the business leader, how do you approach that? Because there's two ways of doing it. And again, there are people out there who are probably listening going, no, I set the goals for my sales team. I tell them what they need to achieve. I've got mates in the car industry who have had that imposed upon them by a head office, and they are so demoralized because they know those goals are not achievable because the head office just goes, you will do that. There's got to be realism. There's got to be some form of incentive to get and if you demoralize somebody with the goals, but the flip side is if someone comes to you with now you've given them the freedom to give you their goal, what if it's not good enough?
Well, then I'll just, first of all, find out what their values are. And for most people, it's family. So I'll start to ask them questions relating more to family because people often have a number in mind, and they might even have a number that's conservative because they know what activities it takes to produce that number. But if I know that they're leaving something on the table, then it's something like, well, if you had more money, what would you do with it? Or if you earned more, what would you do with it? And there might be, take my family on holiday, there'll be something that comes out there. And then I'd rather drill there versus the number to go, well, what are you prepared to do to make that happen? Get from them what, because they might not even be aware or be conscious to the idea that they could achieve it. All right, so what would it look like to do that? Can we do it? And then break that down. So I think changing the perspective slightly from the number to what they would do if they were to achieve that, and then revisit back to the disciplines, it just gives it a new meaning.
Yeah. And I mean, Simon Sinek talks about his why, start with why. And if you read that book, it's a brilliant book, and I'm sure most people have read that book by now. It's also a hard read. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it comes down to, okay, so what is my why? Like, okay, I read the book, I know the theory. What is my why? And I'll never forget, we were in a sales meeting once. I don't think you had joined us, and a lady was sitting in the front row, and she was looking at me very blank-faced. I'd given a lovely training seminar on goal setting and your why and the reason behind it. And she's like, I don't know what my why is. And I knew that she had 2 boys. And I said to her, okay, how important are your kids to you? How important is your family? What if you could up this goal? What are some of the things that you would provide for your boys? And she just sat there and she gave this gasp, like, oh my gosh, I know what you're saying now. So it's so apt that you say for most people it's family. It's not always about the money. People say it's not about the money. It is about the money, but it's more about what am I going to do with the money? How will my life improve? And how will I provide for my family and give them opportunities that ordinarily I wouldn't do on a lower income? So yeah, it is our role as leaders just to push people. But I think you'll see now, and I know you saw it when you were working with us, Josh, you developed very quickly as a mentor and a leader. And it was amazing to watch your journey. And I know you've taken that now into Better Bond. And everything I ever hear from anyone in Better Bond is that you're doing an incredible job. But we're always going to sit in front of people where it's quite frustrating because you can see their potential. You know they can do more, but they're holding themselves back. And this is where you and I have done a lot of work on limiting beliefs and the thoughts and the thinking process that comes from conditioning. So just quickly before we talk about conditioning, so one of the biggest impacts, or the 2 biggest impacts on our behavior as human beings is our past conditioning and our emotions. Our emotions are powerful. And just to give you an example, especially to all the guys out there going, oh, Grant, I can't believe you're talking about emotions. Okay. When the Springboks won the Rugby World Cup, we had 3 games, quarterfinal, semi-final, and final. We won by 1 point. How amazing did we feel? We all bounced into work on a Monday morning and we were on top. We could have done anything that week.
That was.
If we had lost one of those games by 1 point, our whole week would have changed. Okay. Break up with the love of your life. How easy is it to go into work on Monday morning and you feeling that hurt and that pain and that sadness? Anger maybe sometimes, right? Or guilt if you've done something wrong. That emotion clouds you and it impacts your behavior. You're not productive at work. But have a new relationship or sign a new deal or move into a new house. Something amazing happens in your life and you lift it with emotion. It's like you're walking on air. You can do anything. Your behavior changes. And suddenly you're more productive. So that's where emotion is powerful in influencing behavior. But a massive influence on behavior is also our past conditioning. And what do I mean by that is, I always say, what was your lottery ticket in life? Like when you were growing up, those first 7 years of life, who were the influences around you, your parents and your caregivers? How were you raised? A lot of our morals and our values, we imprint from our parents or the people who were around us at the time. And we hear things and we repeat things so many times to ourselves based on the downloading that we do in those first 7 years. And we repeat it so many times over our lives that we start to believe that it's true. And the thinking patterns that develop, we believe are our own. This is the whole point of the book, Thoughtonomy, is to understand that this influences your behavior even today as we sit. I'm 47, you're in your 30s still. We have things that unconsciously are working through our minds daily, and perhaps they aren't serving us well today.
Mm-hmm.
This includes traumatic experiences when we're growing up as kids, or traumatic experiences at any point in our life. And as we maturing and we're growing as young people, all this conditioning is also designed to protect us. It's almost like we learn a strategy. We learn a strategy of how to get through what we needed to get through at that point in our life. But the point is we carry that strategy through as adults, and at some point we have to know and understand that that strategy is not working for us anymore. And the people that we interact with on a coaching basis who are battling against all this conditioning, you can see that their thinking and what they believe fundamentally about themselves is not serving them well today. And this unconscious behavior sometimes holds them back. Now, we see this on a daily basis, right? How has your conditioning impacted you? And I think what's power here, and this is where I want to go, is conditioning is unconscious, which means we don't actually know the behavior. In terms of our behavior, we don't know why we're doing what we're doing because it's unconscious. But the minute we establish a conscious perspective of what's going on, then we can go to work on it. How does your journey tie into exactly what I've just said right now in terms of your development and growth?
Sure.
Sorry, that was a big intro.
That's a very, very big question.
I just wanted to explain it to everybody as to why I'm there, because everybody listening, and I don't think there's any human being who is not conditioned by something that happened in their past.
So let's get a bit more specific.
Okay.
What part of that are you wanting to know from me? My conditioning, where I broke through, where I saw, or how I'm using it today?
Yeah, I think let's talk about the journey.
Cool.
Of first understanding that there's something about my thinking that is holding me back.
Mm-hmm. Or behavior.
Or behavior.
Or behavior.
Yeah.
So I guess that was what I was with you about a year, or maybe my second year with you. When I came to you, I was actually at the time, let's put it this way, what I had come to realize was that my childhood wasn't a very straightforward childhood. There were moments that were great, and throughout it, I always had good people around me. But there were certainly elements to it that, when I share the details of my childhood to people, I often get a look like this. They look at me and go, geez, how did you turn out the way you have? So there are some components to it that are a bit unconventional, for lack of a better word. So in the back of my mind, I've always had this thinking that, surely there could be some scarring. Surely there could be some residue left over from that. And as much as a 27-year-old, people on the outside could look in and go, geez, look at that guy. He's got his head on his shoulders. He's working hard. He's done well for himself. He's established. He's career-driven. A lot of things I would hear from external, there were certainly elements in my life internally that I was starting to question. And to get more specific, it was, let's take my love life, relationships. There were things coming to me that I was realizing, hold on, I'm not moving forward at this component of life. I might be doing very well in my career, but I am struggling in finding the right person, in settling down, in holding a relationship. There were just many factors coming through that I was starting to question, I'm not getting the desired results here. Could this be me? How often do people blame the opposite person? Cannot find the right man, cannot find the right person. All guys are... I was getting to the point where, hold on, I'm making decisions here, and am I making the right decisions? And that's when I approached you, and I approached a few other people to try
and just on that point, your conscious awareness of that factor is powerful. How many people keep making the same mistakes over life and they blame external? It's that whole victim mindset of, it can't be me. So the most powerful thing as human beings that we can ever understand is that we are responsible for everything in our lives. And the minute you take that step back and take ownership of that, it's probably one of the most powerful, empowering decisions you can ever take.
Yeah, and we're going to park that because I want to revisit that. Okay. And that was the second part of my question earlier on is, how do we utilize it today? But going back to that moment, it was about me sitting down with someone, and I think that was the first step, was finding the right person to be able to go through my story to go, am I okay? Or is there perhaps some scarring? And it was amazing how within one conversation, within 1 hour with the right person, we unpacked a bit of my childhood and a lot of awareness came out to that, So without going into the detail, but there was
it almost opens up a genie's bottle, so to speak. Eh?
And it becomes so obvious in that moment. You become so aware, which I was blind to it up to that point. And essentially what it was as a child, I created coping mechanisms. My brain created coping mechanisms where emotionally I was not mature enough to deal with the things going on around me.
Yeah.
So with the primary objective of your brain is to keep you safe and to keep you okay, the brain then creates pathways or segments that prevents you from experiencing that pain elsewhere in life moving forward so that you will be okay.
Let's call that a comfort. It's a comfort zone.
Yeah, sure.
It's keeping you safe and protected.
And, so in my example, when my own parents, when the people closest to me at times couldn't take care of me, that then tells my brain that the people closest to you will let you down, or that the people. So what do? Well, you stop letting people in, right? If I don't let anyone close to me, well, then this can't happen to me again. And so you become ultra independent. All the other things that played out through my later teenage years into my early 20s and 20s, very independent, very career focused, all about me, makes perfect sense when you go through that lens.
And that's fight or flight, isn't it? So whenever you felt that the pain was coming, you fought it off and you had your strategies to cope with that.
Precisely. And again, how it played out was different in different relationships and different scenarios. But I think the overarching thing for me was that it was a coping mechanism that I'd put in place as a child that served me up until my late 20s.
Yeah.
But what I realized is that if I want to be a certain version of myself in the future, to continue to let that play out wouldn't get to the end result that I wanted for my family life. If I wanted to create my own family, if I wanted to have grandkids one day, that wasn't that picture of the perfect life in the future wasn't going to happen for me if I continued on behaving or thinking the same way I did prior.
Yeah.
So awareness was a big thing. And then once I became aware how I was holding myself back at that point, well, then the real work, it was quite easy to become aware.
Yeah.
Easy when you admit it to yourself, but then the real work came in.
When you say easy, it's also easy to just keep deflecting and going, well, it's this person's fault, or it's the market's fault, or it's my environment's fault. I think it's a huge step in going to work on yourself, where you can consciously become aware that you are impacting the results that you're getting right now. So for anyone out there who's listening, who's bumping their head against a wall, and there's something that you want, there's something that you're striving for, but you find that you just can't quite get to it all the time. You always get close and then you bump your head and something happens, and it's frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating because we all know what we want and we aspire towards it, but there's something in our behavior that stops us from getting there. So if you're in your life right now and you're finding that you're bumping your head against a wall constantly, the most powerful question you can ask yourself is, how am I impacting this? And a lot of people don't get this. So it is powerful, because once we realize, okay, this is what I'm doing. So you worked out the strategies that you were using in adult life were the same strategies you were using as a child who had to protect himself at that point in his life. And those same strategies that you used as a child were no longer serving you for the life you wanted to live today.
Correct. In fact, they were going to start going against me. Yes. They were actually going to start working backwards from what I was wanting.
Power. No, that's huge.
But yeah, as you're saying, that's the second point of what I wanted to know this discussion or this segment was working with people today, because you mentioned how you as coaches, you can sit in front of someone and you can see it. But if the person opposite you isn't ready to see it, I do believe timing is a big thing, number one. I've tried to coach even staff today who I can see what's holding them back. It is clear as day to me. And they might complain or vent, or they might keep bumping their heads. But until they're ready to look inwards, I find it can be quite frustrating, because you can lay it all on the line, but they just don't take that.
Have you ever asked them that question? So for somebody in your staff who you can see and I don't say we see because you're visionary. Sometimes we all have blind spots. Right? My blind spots are noticed by people closest to me. And when they point it out, I go, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize I was doing that. Even today, right? So as leaders, and this is now to all the leaders out there or managers out there, if you can see something that the person you're leading cannot, the question is, how are you influencing this? How might you be influencing this right now? It's a quite a specific question back to them, especially if they're blaming everything else. Because I understand the market's bad, but there's evidence to show me that other people in our organization are achieving right now. So they're doing it in the same market. So with regards to your results and your frustrations, how might you be holding yourself back right now?
And I mean, Johari's window, right? I pull it out all the time to try and have these conversations. It sets it out quite nicely to get someone trying to look inward. But I don't know, maybe you can tell me, do you get success every time when you see someone's holding themselves back in helping them see it?
No, because
or do you also have times where
it's a process. So, we've got a drip feed and seed plant. You cannot force anybody to change. It's one of the most frustrating things, whether it's business, personal. You cannot force somebody to see something that they don't want to. And you cannot force or change the will of another person. But what we can do as leaders is we can keep probing and we can keep encouraging and we can keep highlighting to them that there is another way of doing this.
Correct.
There is a blueprint for your success. Why do you keep doing what you do when you know this blueprint exists? And the reason they keep doing what they're doing is because they aren't even aware of their behaviors, because it's unconscious. The thinking patterns are unconscious. So when you realize that your strategies at this point in your life weren't serving you well anymore, how difficult was that process then to go to work on that?
Yeah, no, it was difficult. And I've had people close to me over the last few years. I think that's what happens when you go through something like this. You share your stories with others. Others identify something in it themselves that they want to go on a similar journey. And the amount of people who have started that stop as soon as they start digging deeper amazes me. More people actually pull out than follow through. Because, sitting one-on-one with a coach and really dissecting the details of your past and looking inwards, it can be very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It wasn't fun.
And again, that reaction of the people that pull back is the unconscious response of, oh, I'm feeling uncomfortable now. Let me come back into my safety zone.
100%.
Because that's what I've been using for the last 20 years and it's worked for me in so many ways. So it is a process to push yourself out of a comfort zone. But just know that whenever you're approaching something that feels uncomfortable, you're on the brink of something special. Because when you break through it, you open up a whole new version of yourself. And that new version goes on to a completely new level in your life.
100%. And that goes for every aspect of life. And it's almost a space, I suppose, that I've become very comfortable in, is making myself uncomfortable. Because as soon as you get that feeling, you know that this is pushing you to a place that you've never been before, and who knows what's on the other side. Saying yes to opportunities, coming onto a podcast, standing up in front of talking to people, or emceeing events, all the things that 5 years ago I would have naturally just walked away from. I now get comfortable being uncomfortable, but I guess within that is also then knowing when to say yes and when not to say yes. But learning to be uncomfortable is a very powerful technique, I suppose, or something to embrace.
Absolutely. So our natural response to discomfort is the fight or flight. We're either going to fight it or we're going to run away because it feels awkward. It doesn't feel normal because my conditioning has been imprinted into me over a period of 20, 30 years, depending on your age. And when we try and do something different, that's why people always go, oh, but it's just the way I am. I hate those words. I really hate those words when someone, it's just the way I am. I'm like, it's not the way you are. It's the way you've been taught to think. It's what you've been telling yourself for 30 years. But there is another version of you that just has to make another decision.
Absolutely.
And that's the power. And when I said it's empowering to bring that shift back towards yourself. If I'm blaming the world for my problems, I'm never going to change because I cannot control the world. The only thing I can change or control is myself. So when I make that decision, it's cause and effect, right? It's the natural law of cause and effect, that I'm responsible for everything that happens in my life. And it's empowering because I have the ability then to make a different decision. If this path's not, why would I keep driving to Johannesburg if I want to go to Cape Town? Why would I stay on the road to Joburg? And a lot of people do this with their lives. They keep driving, they want to go to Cape Town, but they're on the road to Johannesburg. And all you have to do is realize that unconsciously I'm going the wrong way. I've got to turn my car around and start driving the other way. And maybe the road's different and I don't know quite where it's going to take me, but there's a signpost saying, hey, this is the way to Cape Town. Just trust it. So it's a big shift to make, but it's a very, very empowering decision.
Definitely.
Because when I'm in control of my choices, or when I understand that I'm in control of my life, I can make different choices. So now tell me today, in terms of, from the outside again, so we don't see everything that goes on the inside. From the outside, it looks like you've shed this. And the minute you shed it, like look at all the different opportunities that opened up. So from a guy who was unsure on relationships, didn't really want kids, right? Was making his way through with his career. Today you're married, you've got 2 kids, and you're heading up the largest bond origination company in KZN. So when I say that this process is powerful in terms of going to work on yourself and re-looking at all these unconscious strategies that are not serving me well, you're a prime example of what it means to shift to a new level. How do people around you react to the new Josh at a new level?
I think so some don't like it. Some do get uncomfortable. I think it's only natural that maybe some fall away because they don't like the new behaviors, or there were certain destructive behaviors that, you had associations with that no longer come with. But it's also been amazing to see people come along for the ride in a sense. Even 2-3 weeks ago, one of my oldest best mates called me up, and he's going through he's experiencing something in his life, and it was just amazing how just by sharing my story and the steps I took, how that's influenced others to do the same. As you said, it's not, you can take someone to water, they don't necessarily always drink, but I think just by having gone on a journey and being able to share that with others, it definitely seems to inspire others to do the same. Definitely.
No, I'm a firm believer that every single one of us has a duty and a responsibility to fulfill our potential here on this earth. And when we do that, not only do we put ourselves in the best possible position to achieve everything that we want to in terms of happiness, and and success is different and it's relative to everybody. As long as I'm happy in my life, I'm winning, right? And if there are things that I want to achieve that will be important and pertinent to me and my happiness, and it's going to be different for you and different. But as long as we can go, I'm happy and I'm heading to where I want to be, high five. But for the people out there who are trying to get to where they want to be, but they can feel that they're just making no inroads, please understand there are different choices that you can make. And I think that's the most powerful message that has come out of this.
Yeah, and you've hit the nail on the head. I think you and I actually in a very, very similar stage came to this realization, but through the work I was doing on myself, something came through that, my biggest fear at the time, I wasn't a dad yet or a husband, so I think I've had a few more fears come in since then. But at the time, my biggest fear was not reaching my full potential. And it doesn't matter how that looks to you. Each person will be different. But when you become aware that you don't want to get to the end of the road or the end of your life and you've left anything on the table, you could have done more, that becomes a powerful driver, something that pushes you out of your comfort zone or gives you the desire to, I guess, push yourself out of your comfort zone. That's powerful, that. Yeah. It's powerful, that.
And again, so for someone listening going, oh, but you're not telling us what you did. Okay, let's just break it down very, very quickly. So the first thing is an understanding of, am I going where I want to? Am I heading in the direction that I want to? Or am I banging my head against the wall? If you're banging your head against the wall, take a step back. How am I impacting this?
Yeah.
Or what is the pebble in my shoe? How am I holding myself back?
Yeah, you only have to ask my wife every time she complains. I'll always look at her and try and put her in the position of, but how are you?
Yeah.
How are you? And it's not to be critical. I always worry that it can come across that way. But whenever I do that to anyone around me when they're complaining about something, it's really about empowering them. Because to me, that is the best thing you can do for someone, is to take it out of your control and put it back into your control.
Yeah.
And it a lot of the time you might look at a certain situation and it doesn't make sense how you could be to blame or how it could be in your control. But if you break it down, there typically is a decision that's been made that's put you in a certain scenario that's allowed this to happen.
Yeah. So the minute you have that realization of, okay, so this is me and I can impact this, then it's a case of understanding, what is it about my behavior that is holding me back? Because if there's a blueprint, if there's a plan for your success, And we can break it down into the activities that you need to do in order to achieve that. Why are you not doing those activities? How are you holding yourself back? Or why are you stopping yourself from doing those activities? What is it within you that is a fear or an insecurity or some form of negative or limiting beliefs in terms of your thinking? How is that holding you back from doing those activities for the thing that you want to achieve? That's when you start going to work on yourself. It's making the unconscious conscious. And I think it's Carl Jung, the psychologist, who has that amazing quote. He says, until you make the unconscious conscious, you'll continue to lead your life and you'll call it fate. We can all be in control of our own destiny, but we need to understand what are the unconscious behaviors that I'm not even aware of that are holding me back. And when we make those conscious, now the hard work starts, because now you got to go to work on them. You got to overcome the fears. You got to go to work on the insecurities. You got to work on your confidence. You got to work on your self-worth. You've got to remove this thinking that's holding you back and reframe the way you think about life, about work, about relationships, because there's a better way to think that'll help you to achieve the results that you want. And that's where the hard work starts. And generally it's done with some form of coach, therapist, or someone who has the ability to guide you and help you.
Yeah, and we're often more often than not, we're going to label those things like I'm too busy, haven't got enough time, wasn't important. So we don't label them these big, obvious, glaring things. And that's why I think a coach is so helpful, because you're labeling it something that you think is normal, and it probably is, but you do need someone to just help you dig deeper to what it is and what's holding you back.
And isn't it amazing? It's probably one of my most fulfilling things is if I'm coaching somebody. I always say, if you come to me at the toughest time in your life, like, I'm excited. Not because you're struggling. I'm excited because I'm meeting you at a low point. And if we do the work together, I get to see the journey from this low point in your life to a new level in your life. And that is so fulfilling. And isn't it amazing when you see somebody break through their own limiting thinking, go to work on themselves, and they just ascend to this new level in their life? It's so inspiring. And that's why I say, when you go to work on yourself and you start hitting your straps and you start achieving your fullest potential, you don't even realize who's watching.
Yeah. And as a coach, the funny thing is that people will always thank you for all the work you've done. And you'll know, it's actually very little that the coach does. It's all in the person.
The coach is just there to guide, to highlight a few blind spots, to ask good questions. But the real work gets done when you leave the coach's office and you go back to your life. And suddenly the new strategy or the new thinking that you're trying, you bump your head a little bit and it starts to feel uncomfortable. You've got to persist. You've got to push through with resilience, because there's a magical life waiting for you on the other side.
Yeah, there is. And I was actually with an agent the other day. He's looking to take over, or he's working with a group of interns. And I said to him, the most powerful tool you can use when mentoring people is failure. Allowing people to fail, because only when they butt their heads themselves will they start to ask, how can I do it better next time? Well, some don't have to go to that extent, but for the most part, allowing people to fail, giving them the opportunity to do it in a safe place is the best way that you can.
And I mean, one of the biggest triggers for change is pain. And it's sad that as human beings, and I always say, please don't ever think I'm sitting here preaching. I struggle with this in my own life as much as you do and as much as everyone listening. I'm a human being just like anybody else. And even as a coach, you can guide somebody to improve their own life, but a coach needs someone to help them as well, because I have my blind spots just as you have your blind spots. So I'm never sitting here preaching, but I believe that the content that we're speaking about today is going to help so many people out there. And I want to thank you so much for sharing so openly, and possibly inspiring a few people out there who are bumping their heads and are going, I don't know why I'm not achieving what I want to achieve.
Or I don't know why my friendship circle isn't who I want it to be, or I haven't got a partner in my life, or I'm not earning what I think I could. It could be any aspect of your life, but knowing that it is in your power, but to ask for help isn't a bad thing.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Before you go, you're a young leader. You're doing an incredible job with Better Bond. What do you think are the attributes? Just give me 2 or 3 characteristics or values of a really impactful leader.
Empathy, absolutely. And you shared something earlier on. I remember starting with you and your dad doing, remember you did his color test. Yeah. And in there, my blue was very low. And like he looked at me and said, we're going to have to work on that. So there's definitely some more empathy we need to extract from you. So empathy is a big one. Listening, the ability, I know it's not an attribute, it's more of a skill, but listening. the skill of really listening to understand, not listening to respond, is one that I just think is missing in
listening is
this
a form
world.
of respect. Like if someone can see you really listening and you hearing them, it's a form of respect.
Yeah, 100%. So I think the skill of listening, and if I would recommend to anyone just to do some research in, I think they call it listening to as a skill. I just think, it's a massive one. And what would be a third? What would be a third attribute? Something I've learned, and I don't know whether it's an attribute, but it's definitely a lesson, and I've seen it in other young leaders, is, we can all let our ambition get ahead of us, and we might fall in love with the title, or we might get driven by having a certain title or a role placed on us. But until you know what the day-to-day workings are of that, you want to be a CEO of a company, it sounds wonderful, but until you actually know what it means to be CEO or what the day-to-day is, I think so. Yeah, something about being humble. I guess it's humility. Would be the third attribute.
Yeah, great point. I'll never forget listening to former President Nelson Mandela's personal assistant, Zelda Lagrange, I think her name was. And somebody in the audience asked her, like, what were the key attributes that Mandela displayed as a leader? And she mentioned pretty much everything you've said. One, I think she said respect. He was very respectful of everybody. If he walked into a restaurant, he would go and greet all the waiters and the kitchen staff first. And there were dignitaries waiting for him. He'd walk into the kitchen and go and shake hands with all the people working in the kitchen. So respect was massive. Humility was another one. He was a very humble man. And the third one has escaped the building right now. It'll probably come back to me. Empathy, respect, discipline. Okay. He was an incredibly disciplined human being.
That probably would be my fourth. Yeah. Discipline kept coming through. Yeah.
But empathy is massive. And I think the new age of leaders are getting that. Gone are the days of being a dictator.
Definitely.
Being a man manager, being someone that just barks out instructions. That's not a leader. That's a manager. A leader is someone who can inspire his or her people and help them to grow. And in order to do that, you have to know who the human being is sitting in front of you.
Yeah.
You've got to know their backstory. You've got to know their conditioning. You've got to understand the struggles that they are struggling with that are holding them back from moving forward. Because until you know that, it's going to remain unconscious and you're going to just see somebody bumping their head against the wall.
Yeah. And I just remember even with you and with our team then, any agent who sat in front of me and who wasn't selling or was going through a bit of a dry spell, we didn't talk work. We went straight to every other area of their life. And if I could help them improve one other aspect of their life, I knew that they were going to then, turn a corner career-wise. That one aspect might have been holding them back, or it might have just changed, taking a bit of attention off what was bothering them, focusing somewhere else, growing there, and then everything else started to fall in place again.
Absolutely. Josh, thank you so much. Why should somebody pick up a copy of Thoughtonomy? What was the biggest sort of takeaway that you got from it?
My name is mentioned in here, about 7 times? That seems to be a good enough reason. No, it's I just think you explain extremely well about one of them being limiting beliefs, but I think you put people into a place of empowerment. You put people into a place with good stories to understand how they can be holding themselves back. And I think the way you explain a lot of the ideas in there are done very, very well.
Well, that was the intention. It was for someone to read that book and go, oh my gosh, this could be me. And there's some work to do here and I can change my life. So if you haven't got a copy of the book yet, please visit thoughtonomybook.co.za. It's there. It's available online. I'd love to hear what you think of it. Give me a shout out at the end of your read and let me know how you found the read. But Joshua, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been an awesome chat.
It's been cool.
Awesome chat.
Very cool.
And wish you all the best for whatever happens from here on in your life. I know it's just going to continue to go up.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Granty.
Cheers. Thanks for listening, everybody.